MA4G9. MA4G9, the Nearpod code. If you could jump your way in there, that would be fantastic. All right, now, as said, one of the big arguments with regards to trade is, should we do it, right? Should we trade with other countries, right? Part of the whole aspect of trade is, international trade at any rate, is that idea of exporting to another country and importing. But there are some quite weird things that go on with this. You'll find countries that export a product and import the same product, right? Because it's worth more to them to export the product and then import a cheaper product, yeah? Because they're earning money from the exports and buying the cheaper imports. So that can be quite an unusual sort of statistic when you look at it. You might also find some people, and this was definitely the case in New Zealand, who argued that the products that New Zealand was exporting, so the meat products in particular, they would export the top quality meat products because those were the ones that they would get the most money for, and the lower quality meat products would be the ones that would be in the domestic market. So New Zealand consumers getting, you know, the worse meat, right? And maybe health implications with regards to that. There are also trading issues when, say, you've produced too much of your product and nobody is buying it. And there are some countries that have decided to dump the product, so to sell it below cost in another country. You know, product dumping. It's actually illegal, but it does happen. And again, from a New Zealand example, we had some of the countries in the Pacific who complained to the World Trade Court, because such a thing there is, that New Zealand was dumping this meat in their market, and it was very high fat meat. It's probably more fat than it was meat, and they were suffering the health consequences with regards to that. So New Zealand causing their health issues. Then you'll find those who say you've got to buy local, you've got to buy New Zealand made, or buy Malaysian local products, right? Or keep America great again, yeah? Buying local saves jobs, buy local, spend here, keep it here. These sorts of slogans you might find around, and particularly politicians will be very keen on it. So if there's a difference there between you buying something from overseas and you buying something locally, and I don't know if you have bought things off of Shopee or Lazada or any of the other online shopping platforms, but you might find in there, or you probably have already, that you can choose whether it comes from overseas or local, right? And sometimes the ones that come from overseas are going to be actually considerably cheaper than the ones that you can buy locally, despite the fact that they're coming from overseas. So now this has got a wee video right in here, and I'm going to attempt to play this, but I'm hoping it's not going to crash the internet. Are we okay with me attempting to play this, or shall I just allow you to think about it?
We can play it soon. Have
a go? All right, so if it crashes, just bear with it and we will hopefully come back to it. All right? Okay, are we better off if we buy local is the name of the video.
In our previous Everyday Economics videos, we asked you, the viewer, to tell us where the course should go, and you did. The top voted topic was, is everyone better off if we buy local? That's a great question. There are many arguments behind the case to buy local. Lots of these arguments involve consumer tastes and preferences, about which economics has little to say. What economics can shed light on is the question of whether spending money locally keeps more money flowing through the community, which allegedly benefits local businesses and increases the number of local jobs. First, a practical issue. In a modern economy, almost nothing is produced 100% locally. Maybe that apple that you picked up at the local farmer's market did grow on a tree only 5 miles from your house. But what you also need to consider are these things. The bees trucked in to pollinate the orchard, the fertilizers that feed the apple trees, and the wooden box the farmer uses to tote his apples to market. None of these things are made locally. The fact is, that local apple isn't as local as it seems. And the profits of the local farmer are also likely to be spent non-locally. So it's naive to suppose that if you buy from a local supplier, that your money necessarily remains confined to the local economy. But suppose that you could direct your money locally and that all of your neighbors do the same. Would that be good for the local economy? It's important to realize that much of the money flowing into your community comes from the outside. So if we're good for your community to stay local, then it would be good for other communities to stay local as well. Think about all the jobs and businesses that exist today. How many of them could survive solely on local business? If you've watched our previous videos, you know that globe-spanning specialization is a huge source of our amazing modern prosperity. Specialization increases with the size of the market. If you force markets to be small, you shrink specialization. And if you shrink specialization, you make people less productive. So it's a mistake to believe one can buy local, still have the same products available at the same prices. Buying locally is what we did for thousands of years, because we didn't routinely trade over long distances. It was the opposite force that helped us to our modern prosperity, namely the ability to cooperate with multitudes of strangers much further away, the ability to apply scale to be more productive, and to utilize ideas from all over the world. A widely followed buy local strategy would mean higher prices and less variety. We voluntarily make ourselves poorer. That's not to say that some local products aren't worthwhile. I personally love the freshness of local produce and some unique local restaurants, but I buy these products because they're better, not just because they're local. The best way to have your local community thrive is to produce products and services that people want. There are other arguments to the case for buying local that we don't have time to cover in this video, but if you'd like to see them addressed, go vote. We are at your service. Voting continues, so please send us whatever additional everyday economics questions you have. Here's the current leaderboard. Go vote and tell us what topics you want covered next.
All right. Okay. So what is not a consequence of more people buying locally? Right, you've got a few options there, and remember it's phrased as a negative. So what is not a consequence of more people buying locally? There you go. Good. Well done so far. Is not a consequence of more people buying locally. Okay. All right, team, well done. Not a consequence of more people buying locally, higher productivity or output per worker. Well done. The main argument against buying locally was what? To go. Hmm. Okay. Struggling a bit more with this one. Okay. So the main argument against buying local, well, it will not work if everyone is doing it, as one community's gain is another community's loss, right? So that idea that if everybody is buying locally, all of you are then not contributing to the other areas, So all of those specializations, etc., disappear. Now, have you found examples where buying, sorry, there's two of you. That's okay. There can be two of you, Joel. There can be twins. That's absolutely. Isn't it a case where more Joels is better than less Joels? Isn't that what we find? We all want more Joels in our life. Thankfully, in the class we've got two, but now we might have three. I don't know. We can have more Joels. Now, have you found a case where where you've found something that you could buy overseas, but you could also buy it locally? Have you had that decision before?
Yep.
Yeah. I had it just yesterday, to be perfectly honest. I was online on Shopee. Go figure. And there was something that Harley was particularly keen on getting, and I had two options. I could buy it from China, and if I bought it from China, it was going to cost me 8 or 9 ringgit each to buy, and the one that was local, 80 ringgit. 80. It was literally 10 times more expensive to buy it locally than it was to buy it from China. And yeah, to be perfectly honest, I bought both. Yeah, well, because if it's coming from China, it's going to take longer to get here than if it's local. So then I figured, I think that would be quite better. I think that would be better getting both. But I had a similar sort of situation, but kind of different in New Zealand when I used to buy. Are you familiar with this technology, DVDs? Are you familiar with those? They used to be all the rage, I've got to say. And before that, we had these things called VHS, which was even more scarily old-fashioned technology. Right? Well, when I used to buy DVDs, because I bought a few, right? Let's be honest, I bought a few, okay? And in New Zealand, because New Zealand was at the bottom of the world, the way the DVDs used to arrive is they had to put them in a container ship with other things, right, and ship it all the way to Australia first, offload some, and then ship it all the way from Australia to New Zealand. So back then, and I know I'm talking years ago, okay, but back then to buy a new release DVD movie in New Zealand was between 40 and 50 New Zealand dollars. Now, you might think, oh yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot. Well, multiply that by 4 to get ringgit value. All right. And then, sorry, yes?
160 for anyone.
Well done. All right, good for maths for this time of the morning. And then consider that the time period that I'm talking about is, 30 odd years ago. So, yeah, that was a lot of money back then, right? 25 years ago, somewhere around there. That was a lot of money. And what I did was I actually worked out, because there was this new thing, and it was called the internet. I don't know if you've heard of it, okay? And I went on the internet and I did a little bit of research, and I found a company in Belfast, Ireland that sold DVDs. And with this thing called email, which was quite new to me as well at the time, I emailed them, and sure enough, they said they would be perfectly happy to post, like in the post, a DVD to me. And then they told me how much it was, okay? And it worked out that it was going to be cheaper for me to personally buy DVDs online from Belfast in Ireland and have them ship it to New Zealand than it was for me to go to the local shop and buy them, because they'd obviously come in the container. Now, you can argue about, profit incentives and all of those sorts of things as well. And I liked the company in Ireland. I did. One of the things that they used to do is they used to put little thank you notes when you bought something from them into the little parcel. And I've always liked that sort of personal, and they were handwritten and everything. It was lovely. I was just brilliant. Customer service. And one day, one of the DVDs, I was bust, right? It didn't work. And I emailed them thinking that, they were going to tell me, tough, right? And they said, do not panic, sir. Send it straight back to us. We will credit your account with the cost of shipping it back, which they did. And they immediately sent me another copy of it, which I then received. They didn't even wait for my copy to arrive back in Belfast, Ireland, right? Because it would have taken longer for it to get there than the other new copy to arrive. It was brilliant. And because I was very into, I don't know if you're familiar with Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan. I've watched a couple of them, just a couple, right? And you just could not buy them in New Zealand. Oh, another one, Mark Dacascos. You want to know who he is? He was in a new movie relatively recently. He was one of the bad guys in John Wick 3 or 4, whichever number they're up to now. But he was a bad guy in that. But he's also been on TV in America as the Iron Chef for some weird reason. But in any case, you could not buy those sorts of Hawaii 5-0, possibly. You could not buy them in New Zealand at all. There just wasn't the market for them, surprisingly enough. So Belfast, Ireland, that was the way to get them. So international trade's got a lot of those sorts of questions about it. What about this one? Would you buy a product from a country if you were politically concerned about the human rights records in that country? What do you think?
Human rights as in terms of like labor, or just in general human rights?
Any. Yeah.
Probably yes.
Probably yes.
Right.
Right. It was another argument that we used to have. Depends person to person, yeah. But we used to have this in the economics department at the university a lot. We used to have a lot of students say they didn't want to buy anything from China because they do slave labor in China. Maybe they do, yeah. And to which I used to reply to them, is that from China, is it? Okay. To which I used to reply to them, all right, well, what happens if you don't buy the product? All right? Or the coffee makers or the chocolate makers in countries where, they're on the farm and they get the very small profit, but the big corporation gets all of the profit, yeah. Well, if you don't buy the product, then there's going to be that small amount of money that they were getting, they're not going to get that. Yeah. So even if it's a rubbish job or a low-paying job, they've got a job and they're being paid. And it may not meet our international labour standards, but it's quite possibly better than the alternative. I then suggested to them that they might want to have a look at what international labour standards actually say, right? And maybe then use that as an avenue for an argument, as opposed to trade in and of itself. People tend to view this idea of boycotting trade and seemingly thinking that this is a win for you, but you are depriving yourself of that product. So you personally aren't winning, I wouldn't think. But you are making some sort of a statement. But I'm not entirely sure that the statement that you're making is the one that you're thinking you are. Yeah?
There's a big trend going around, sir. Well, I don't know. Some people actually like believe in it and have opinions on it, and some people just follow the trend of like boycotting like fast fashion. It's like
Yes.
H&M, like Zara and all that. And then my argument has always been, if they boycott it, I'll keep buying so that they still get an income. We can't all boycott.
And there are genuine concerns people have, like the environmental impact of those sorts of businesses, yes. And the labour practices, absolutely. But what you've got to argue, I think, and feel free to disagree with me, I'm not necessarily saying I'm right, okay? But what you've got to understand is that it's not boycotting a product isn't going to fix the labour problems. Boycotting the product isn't necessarily going to fix any environmental issues that there are. Maybe a better way is to actually approach government bodies and those sorts of political influence people and get them to work, with each other. And again, that doesn't work necessarily all the time either, as we're well aware. But, now there are other arguments that you can make. Obviously, the subsidies, etc., on huge businesses. If you're really interested, and you might be in this sort of a topic, you can have a look at how many subsidies there are in the sugar industry, okay? Which is an industry that, I don't know, it goes into quite a few products. And so therefore, it has an influence over a whole range of products and a whole range of politicians, or the oil industry. How much influence do they actually have? So should we boycott the oil? Should we stop trading with products that have sugar in them? We've got to try and figure out policies that actually aren't necessarily to do with trade at all, but they might instead be to do with the practices of producing the products, or the labour practices, or human rights issues, etc. Those are potentially the issues that we should be, tilting at, rather than trade. Now, we're going to cover a lot more about why we should trade and the thought processes behind trade. But one of the questions I'm going to be getting you to research very, very soon, it should appear in the classroom very soon, I don't think it has yet, is it's about a particular philosophy. And it was around a long time ago. Some of you may remember it from IGCSE days, some of you may not. And it is called mercantilism. So one of the things I would like you to look up is about the idea of mercantilism. What is it? What was their philosophies? What are their philosophies on trade? Who were the main proponents of mercantilism? I think one of the other questions was, what did mercantilism give the world? And who were the leading people who were against mercantilism? So there's a bit there to do, right? And that's going to appear in the classroom. It's all about trade, okay? Their philosophies echo around trade. Some of you will probably know this already, either from IGCSE or from when you did your history of economic thought. Famous economists all those years ago, all those months ago, okay? Which probably does feel like years ago to you now. All right, so that will appear in the classroom. That will be a mini research project for you to work on, right? Now, so that's what I'm going to get you to have a go at sort of now-ish, right, is to do that research. It will appear in the classroom. If it hasn't, I'm going to force it into the classroom for you, okay? Otherwise, if there are any particular questions that you have with regards to anything we've been covering so far, you can stay on the line, or anything else that you want to ask. Otherwise, as we'd say in the land of my birth, hey kornera, which means goodbye for now. See you.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. David?
Yeah.
This isn't a question, but I started reading Freakonomics.
Oh, good. It's an interesting book.
Mm. It's the revised edition, though.
Yes.
Yeah. But still good.
Yes. There's Super Freakonomics as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some even more challenging things in it. But yeah, I like that incentive, the sort of behavioral economics incentive part that they talk about quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the idea of unintended consequences and those sorts of aspects of it. I find that quite fascinating. They do a lot of statistical analysis to try and prove their points. And that's always interesting. And sometimes what they are proving is kind of counterintuitive to what you would normally think. And so that's quite interesting. And also the connections that they make are quite unusual too. Like the sumo wrestlers and the school teachers.
Yeah.
You know? Although you're looking at me going, yeah, sumo wrestler. Right. So, yeah. All right. Have a great day.
Me too.
Thank you. See you. You all right, Wenhao?
Yes. Because I didn't come to, I guess it's Tuesday session.
Yeah.
So did we learn some new stuff at Tuesday session?
Yes. Well, Tuesday session, they did their presentations. So, yeah, we didn't actually do much of the topic work, the content work at that point. They were just finishing off their presentations. Okay.
Okay. Sounds great.
The recording of their presentation should be up in the YouTube. The link should be in the classroom. So you can look through that, but there's also a document, and the document should have links to all of their presentations in it. So you can actually just find their individual presentations and have a look through those as well. Okay?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Any other questions you have, dude?
Nope.
All right. Well, I'll post this thing into the classroom, and then I will see you sometime later.
Tomorrow. Is that tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
Have a good day, dude.
You too. And
See you.
bye.
Bye.